But let's talk about whether lockdown has created a degree of civil disorder. Have we forgotten how to be in a community and a society? Take a look. If you're watching us on Talk Radio TV, by the way, if you want to do that, all you have to do is go to Twitter or YouTube, search Talk Radio, and we are there live. This is a television broadcast as well, of course, as radio. And this is the moment that a mass brawl broke out on a Tunisia flight over baggage space. Take a look at this. Now, I haven't got audio on this, but you'll see the footage as it plays out, and it's quite extraordinary. You've got flight attendants who are pushing back, holding back various members of the flight who are trying to essentially attack each other. And it's all about a lack of cabin space. You know, the overhead cabin space that you get on a plane. They're shoving each other. Some are wearing masks, others are not. But it's a very febrile atmosphere. And I wonder whether it's quite indicative of life post-lockdown. Are we going to have to get used to the fact that we've forgotten how to be a community and a society? Has lockdown led to a breakdown of common decency? Let's speak now to the brilliant television psychologist Emma Kenny. Hello, Emma.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm really well. Great to have you on the show. My contention is that if you lock the population up for the best part of a year and treat them like children, then they may begin to behave like that.
I mean, one of the things I would say is air rage is pretty well documented. So this has happened before. I've actually seen videos like this before. But I think the point that you're making about the fact that we've all been stuck inside, also there's been a hell of a lot of judgmental division in our society that I think people have a very low patience control at the moment. And also, if you think about our brain, the prefrontal cortex has been pretty much squashed by stress and anxiety, meaning that that instinctual area of your brain, the amygdala, is very much in full control a lot of the time. So that desire to fight or flight or freeze or to just kind of deal with instantaneous reactions, that's very much in control a lot of the time, which is why you also see when people go out for a pint, people are getting ambulances called because the area of control isn't quite functioning as it would have been a year ago, because it's had a massive impact on our brain. It's an experiment. The past year has been a huge experiment on our brain.
Well, indeed. And therefore, a peaceful society is not something we can take for granted anymore, perhaps.
I mean, I think that after a year of basically having isolation, not being able to have normal freedoms, feeling anger because you have different and disparity views to people who are members of your own family, they're all things that contribute to a lack of patience, and a lack of patience contributes to acting in ways that we wouldn't ordinarily afford ourselves. But also, if you additionalize that now at the moment to the disparity of views between things like masks and non-mask wearers and lockdown skeptics, there's a lot of real intense emotion, usually nothing to do with those actual things. Actually, it's more to do with a lack of sense of autonomy, feelings of fear over our environment, feelings of fear about the future. It makes us feel uncertain. And some people react to uncertainty with aggression, because anger is one of those one-fits-all solution emotions. If I feel scared, humiliated, afraid, worried, I can use anger to instantaneously manage that. It's like a shadow emotion. It doesn't resolve what's really going on, but it gives me an outlet for that immediacy. And I think when you've had a lack of control in your life, that immediacy gives you something to have ultimate control with. It doesn't work effectively in the long term, but just in that moment. Like in the long term, we know from that video that you've just seen, they're going to get escorted off and probably arrested. It's not a long-term consequential thought process that's going on. And that's the thing about being a human. We are conscious, we are incredible beings, but we're also animals.
Is there a degree of anarchy when you essentially release human beings that have been held captive for a year? Is there something psychological going on that makes people a little wild because, you know, it's like you've opened the doors of the cage?
I mean, to some degree, I think that we haven't been anarchic at all. I think the past 12 months, I'm really surprised that the level of compliance and the level of behaviour. I think that what happens is if you add alcohol to any equation, when you've maybe felt contained, then you might get an explosion, yes. But I think it usually takes something like territory, which you saw in that video. That was territorial. This is mine. you don't have a right to be in my space. So I think that parallels a lot of the way that people have felt in supermarkets and in other areas, that you don't have a right to be near me, because we've indoctrinated people with that. So when we put them in close proximity with others, that's now a behavior that's been learned differently to the bias that they had prior, which would be completely normal to be leaning over people. Like, think about people on the tube. We used to be under people's armpits. We weren't fighting with them, but we've been told for a year it's dangerous to be near anybody within 2 meters. So now we don't just have territory, we have a learned bias that says if you come anywhere near me, you're a threat. So that's not the people who have done that. And it's not the individuals who created that mindset. They've been taught it. It's been very powerful. I mean, you just have to go to a supermarket to see the impact of territory. And now it's intimate space is not considered appropriate for strangers. So I think they're more victims of circumstance and programming, as opposed to vicious individuals who can't control themselves.
And unfortunately, we're seeing citizens policing each other, aren't we? Individuals are being harangued for not wearing a face covering in a supermarket, even if perhaps they're exempt. And this is a big problem, that we're sort of within society, we've been set upon each other, perhaps because of what the state have done.
You know, I always think that one of the strangest things about the last 12 months is, you know, what makes humans really healthy is being social, being community orientated, spending time around loved and close bonds. But also another reason why we live long lives is when we have in kind of minute detailed conversations with strangers, those chats at the shop. That gives us a long life. It actually is one of the reasons we have a long and healthy life. To take all of that away is something that's unprecedented and hasn't ever happened to human beings before. So we know that on a brain level, that's going to have had major impact. On an emotional level, it's going to have a major impact. And then on a legitimacy level, judgment and blame has become part and parcel of almost second nature, both online and offline. And that's very toxic, because the thing that makes happy humans is being surrounded by other humans, lots of us, in close proximity, chatting about the weather, talking to each other at bus stops, seeing each other's facial expressions, the micro expressions. My smile is there to tell you that my teeth are baring in a way that shows you I'm not going to attack you. So our facial cues are incredibly important. So whether you're on-side for masks or off-side for masks, the point is you cannot deny the impact of not being able to see each other's expressions and the distance that's been placed between us because of social distancing. They're very real. And like I said, I think it's going to take a very long time to decontaminate people. And programming is powerful. Habits take anywhere between 17 and 260 days to form, but the average around 66 days. We've had a lot longer than that to form our habits. To undo those is going to take a lot of compassion, a lot of kindness, a lot of resisting judgment, and also maybe placing accountability where accountability deserves to be, as opposed to on our neighbours and friends who maybe have struggled greatly. Maybe if we afford our communities a sense of compassion, we'll have returned compassion, which can only be a good thing after a horrible year.
I think
a
horrible year. I mean, I think one consequence of lockdown, Emma, is that we have, as a society, become even more tribal. I mean, everything's tribal these days, isn't it? Veganism, trans rights, Brexit, of course, previously, this current government, and ultimately the big dividing line, COVID. You have people who are the lockdown fanatics who think it's the bubonic plague and we're all about to drop dead. And then you have other people with different values, a different attitude to risk, who would rather take their chances and get on with their lives. That's a big division. Will that division be with us forever?
I mean, I hope not. I have great faith in humanity. And I think we all have certain points that we get to where we realise things aren't working for us. And I completely understand the lockdown fanatics, because, you know, if you have had a year where maybe you've been paid to stay at home and you've had a decrease in stress, that's important to acknowledge. You know, I can't feel angry with those people. That's about work-life balance. But those who've been terrified, you can't feel angry with those either, because they've been horribly terrified. Equally, I have complete sympathy with those people who've earned no money and just want to get back out there and don't feel afraid. They're really interesting experiences. But the parallel is that we've all had to deal with a completely uncertain world, and we're all struggling with that. So I suppose, how do we move forward through it? Well, the first thing is forgiveness, that other people don't happen to have your points of view, and compassion, that people do want to live a different life, even if it's not in tandem with what you wish to live. It's about accepting our differences and recognizing that, you know, it's a unique capacity to be an individual, and we should celebrate that. And I guess the thing that has really stuck out for me in the past 12 months is people have wanted something to believe in. And I wonder whether that's a bit more of an existential question for human beings. How has it become that maybe so many of us haven't had something to all join together and believe in? And I think that when you look at other countries where maybe they have spirituality, maybe a bigger faith centric experience, maybe the reason they've fared better is because they don't ultimately all believe in one thing that's being told or fight against one thing that's being told. Their quest is for something a bit deeper. And I think COVID has given people something to connect with. And connection's really important for human beings. And maybe what we need to do with that is say, okay, maybe COVID isn't where we need to connect anymore. Maybe there's a deeper thing that we need to explore, to connect on. And one of those things that I would suggest is happy communities and working together to make the best of our neighborhoods and the best for young people. Because if there's one thing that I know that's coming out of this, is that we're going to have a whole nation of children who've been horribly impacted on. And as wiser, older people, let's stop our attention being turned on each other in a nasty way. And let's think about something we can actually do that's helpful for our children in the future. Because that's where the real damage, in my opinion.
It really is. And you've been such an important voice throughout this pandemic, Emma, coming from a place of integrity and empathy, in my view. And long may that continue. You can follow Emma on Twitter at Emma Kenny TV. Amazingly, she hasn't been deplatformed or cancelled for daring to focus on the impact of these ruinous lockdowns. Thank you so much, Emma.